Hi, I'm Pharaoh, and today is another Steam controller configuration video, and this time I'm going to be focusing on Gyro. Specifically, I want to look at using Gyro for on foot, so running around, shooting things, maybe fighting sentinels or running around a derelict freighter, just being able to use Gyro instead of having to use mouse and keyboard. Now the idea is it should make it a little bit more accurate to shoot things, and theoretically I want to set it up so I could just naturally use it for navigation as well, just running around. Now what I've done is I've set up a base specifically for this purpose, which I will be sharing all the details of, so you can also use the base for this purpose as well. And I'm going to go through the various configurations and how to calibrate it, and then I will be sharing that configuration on the community system, so you can also download that and tinker with that. But if you want to, you can just come to this base and just follow along and see how it works for you, because you might find you need to have slightly different settings. So let's get started with Gyro on Steam controller in No Man's Sky. So I've made this base purely for calibration, and the way I've set it up is I've got these two arrows pointing upwards on this door here, which is the forward position. It's not aligned north-south, this is roughly south, but that's irrelevant really. And then we have 45 degrees, I have one mark on there. At 90 degrees I have two marks pointing back towards the starting position. And then the next one we have one on the other side of the door, and then that one, that's backwards, so it's pointing downwards. And then one on the left side of the door, and then the two for the 90-degree angle, and then the one on the other side of the door closest, and there. So you can tell where you're looking at any time based on the markings. So what you do is you look at the two pointing upwards wall and you back up in first person until you are stuck into this corner here, and then you walk forward until you're in the middle. And then from that point you can calibrate your directions as you're turning around. Because I've uploaded this base, you can come to this location and you could set it up for any angle or any form of calibration that you want to do. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to stick to a very simple calibration to 90 degrees, and then we'll work from there. Those are the glyphs if you want to come here and do this yourself on my base. So the idea is I stand in the middle, position it with my mouse or my controller on that central point there. It doesn't really have to be as accurate as I'm trying to make it. And then I will rotate my gyro 90 degrees and see if I can line it up approximately to there, and 90 degrees approximately to there. Now the accuracy I'm looking for is somewhere on that wall. It doesn't have to be pinpoint accuracy to the middle. I found that No Man's Sky just doesn't have that kind of rendering engine, because it doesn't use a preloaded map as such. Then it will never be that accurate. The problem is with this kind of calibration is there are so many variables. For instance, in the game, if we go to controls, I have these all set to default. So I clicked reset to default, and then I changed what I wanted for my various flight controls back to how I wanted them. So if you're going to do that before you calibrate, just double check what you have set on these sections and then reset to default on these three. Also, it's worth noting that since I put my controller down, pick my mouse up and click on the screen, these also have default settings. And again, I mean, it does tell you what the defaults are on the right hand side. So you could just set them manually to default. I just found it easier to hit reset to default. The other configuration that can alter things is the field of view. I currently have my on-foot field of view set to 105 degrees and flight field of view at 100 degrees. I have my camera height at eye level. These are all variables that can impact how things feel when you're using Gyro. So you might want to play with all of these settings, or just replicate what I have here just for the purposes of following along. So the easiest way to get into the controller settings would be to hit the Steam button, which should pull up the Steam overlay. If you're not using a Steam controller, or you're using some other Steam input method for Gyro, you can get to this menu with Shift Tab, and then we're going to go down here and click on the controller settings. Sometimes you don't have the Steam overlay open. You can go into Steam itself and click on the controller. Either way, we'll end up in this menu. And then I'm starting with the official layout for No Man's Sky, and it just says official configuration. There are two official configurations. There's one, the official layout for No Man's Sky, which was based on the PC Steam originally, and there's an official layout for No Man's Sky Steam Deck layout with Gyro support. I'm not using that. I'm using the standard one, and I'm building my own Gyro support. Then I'm going into On Foot, and I'm going to set up, let's apply that layout, and I'm going to set up in the On Foot command, I'm going to set up Gyro as Gyro to mouse, not as mouse. And then I'm going to go into the cog. Then I'm going to go into choose Gyro buttons, and I'm going to completely remove them. Now this isn't permanent. None of the things I'm doing initially are permanent. This is purely calibration. And then I'm going to change the dots per inch down to, I don't know, say somewhere around 1,000. It's basically trying to work out how many mouse pixels there are between you and 360 degree circle. So if you're looking in one direction and you look all the way around, how many mouse pixels that would be. I'm also going to turn the gyro sensitivity down to 1. So I'm going to slide it using my mouse down to 1. If for some reason you can't get it there, I was having difficulty getting it there earlier, you can always do the adjust slider and it will do it in increments. See, it's now no longer doing to the 1. You can do fine adjustment and it will do it really small increments. Fine adjustment on the Y button. So 1 to 1. However many dots we have, we want it to be 1 to 1, and then we will adjust that sensitivity later. So we're not going to keep it at 1 to 1, but this is just for the initial calibration. Then the vertical horizontal, I don't want any vertical movement while we're calibrating. So again, this is a temporary situation. Slide that all the way to the left. I'm going to leave the dead zone where it is. Precision speed, I'm leaving that as it is. I'm not going to have any momentum. If you have any momentum, then it will just keep going in one way or the other. And I'm changing the gyro orientation to world space. Now, again, world space isn't necessarily the way we will leave it. We'll see as we get through this process, but world space is what we need for now. I won't go into too many details about how that works. It's just related to how the controller moves and how the orientation is on the screen. We don't need any trigger dampening at the moment. We don't want a movement threshold. I don't think it's going to filter out any movements. And I'm going to leave haptics off for now. That's pretty much set up as we want it. So to recap, no buttons, somewhere around 1,000 pixels for the angles to mouse pixels, gyro sensitivity 1 to 1, no acceleration, absolutely no vertical movement, and everything else pretty much as standard, apart from the gyro orientation we're going to set to world space. Now we're going to go back and back again. And you'll see sometimes it just defaults back to menus, but on foot we now have it as gyro to mouse, and we have those settings in there. And I seem to have moved slightly, so let me just double check that I'm in the right spot. So I'll go into it was probably accurate enough, but I'm just going to walk looking directly down, or as directly down as we can. I think that's about right. So now I'm literally going to use a rotation, a physical rotation. So let me put myself back on the camera a second. I'm literally going to align myself with that thing, but also my physical alignment is with my desk. I'm looking straight at my desk at the moment, and then I'm going to swivel in my chair, and I'm going to go around 90 degrees. And now I'm going to look directly at my wall to the right of me, and that's pretty accurate. That's in the area that I'm looking for. I mean, it would be ideal just about there-ish, but there's not too bad. And then I'll recalibrate. It doesn't always go back exactly where you would expect. There can be a bit of a drift one way or the other, which is not surprising with a gyro system, but I don't think it really matters that much. Accuracy, especially in this game, accuracy is not that important. And then again, I'm going to line up with that thing, and I'm just going to drift all the way and look at my other wall, and then look over my shoulder to see where we've ended up. In this case, we've ended up nowhere near where I wanted, which is about there. So let me just go back and test that again. And maybe I was pointing directly at the screen. So I'm facing directly at my desk and lining up on the screen, and then I'm going to rotate. Yeah, I think I was probably not aligned properly. It's going a bit further that direction. Ideally I'd like it to be the same both ways. Let me just test to the right again. So it probably is roughly the same. So in that case, it's going a little bit too far for what we want. So we want to reduce that from what we have here at the moment. So let's edit it again. Gyro on foot. I'm going to change it to 950. Done. Back. Now if you really wanted to be precise, what you could do is you could just put your controller on your chair and turn it without sitting on it, so you're not even messing around with your hands, which is what I did when I was first testing this. I don't know if it's really important to be that accurate, but you can do that. Or if you don't have a swivel chair, then maybe just place the controller on the desk and then turn it. In fact, I'll do that now. So I'll try and line it up with the desk. I'm positioning it on the desk. And then I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees. It's about there. And turn it 90 degrees the other way. That seems pretty accurate. It looks as if it's slightly further one way than the other. Like I say, that does seem to happen a lot. Let's adjust with my stick. So I've got it straight on the desk. I'm going to turn it to the right. It's slightly more, so maybe it's still a little bit over calibrated, but we're getting pretty close now. Let's change that to 920 and see how different that is. I wouldn't have thought there would be an awful lot in it, to be honest. So line that up with my chair, turn to one wall. That's pretty accurate. And if I line back up with my chair, it's drifted slightly. As I say, I don't think it matters that much. And then I'm going to line up the other way. And that's pretty accurate. So 920 seems to be my sweet spot. Let's stick with that 920, but I'm going to increase the gyro sensitivity back to the default value. And now you can see it's already faster. And if I just casually swing myself to look at one side of my screen and then the other side of my screen, so I'm just kind of lining up in the middle of my screen and then turning to the edge of my screen, it feels quite natural. It feels kind of representative of roughly how far I'm moving. But of course there's no up and down at the moment. I can only go up and down if I use the stick. So the vertical horizontal is currently set to -100, which is effectively off. I'm going to use X on my controller to set that back to default, and then I'm going to slide it all the way to the left until it's -75, I think. From now on, a lot of these things are going to be based on your taste, so this is just what I feel might be about right, and you can adjust them however you wish. And then in-game, our left and right, it's feeling nice, up and down, and that's not too bad. It might be a little bit too fast still even. If I put my controller on the screen, I'm not adjusting it that much for the amount that we'd usually be looking at. Occasionally if you're shooting at an enemy in No Man's Sky, you're rarely looking down, but you're often looking kind of up. Sometimes you're looking all the way up, so I'm having to turn my controller all the way upside down there. So maybe that's a little bit too sensitive, but we'll see how we go with that. Now the last thing I'm going to do is trigger press mouse dampening. Now the idea of this is while you're pressing the actual trigger, it will soften the movement. It will make it slightly more accurate when you're moving to left and right. It will slow it right down. So I'm going to do it on the right trigger. I'm going to do soft pull and hard pull so we don't accidentally trigger it one way or the other. And then I'm actually going to dampen it a little bit more than that. Let's go to about 75%. So now, while I'm shooting, I can move my controller around quite a lot, and it's not moving around as far up or down or left and right. Which just means that once you're zeroing in on a target, you can just be a little bit more accurate. So normal movement, trigger movement. So we've done a couple of things now. We have calibrated our mouse to 920 pixels. You may find that it's different, but we've calibrated it for 90 degrees in-game is the same as 90 degrees sitting in my chair. And then I've increased the sensitivity to make it comfortable for me, and you may change that again for what's comfortable to you. So both of these settings are going to potentially be different for you, but one of them is going to be different for objective reasons. The way that the game is responding for you when you're turning on the one-to-one basis is going to be higher or lower. And then the sensitivity is preference based, what you want from your actual motion when you're moving. And the same for the vertical horizontal output mixer, how you feel when you're looking up and you're looking down. The next thing we want to do really is decide whether or not we always want to leave gyro on. And I would suggest that you shouldn't. Most people do not leave gyro on all the time. What they tend to do is they have some other button or some other capacitance touch that turns gyro off. And I'm going to do that now. The most basic way to do it is switching it to right stick touch and then hold to suppress. So we go back into the game. So what we're doing now is I'm just normally controlling with my stick, my controller. So I'm just using my right stick to look around. And while my finger is on that stick, Gyro's not doing anything. So I can move my controller around, I can swivel in my chair, nothing's happening apart from what I'm doing with my stick. But if I take my thumb off of the stick, then instantly I have the swivel in my chair and I can look up and down. And so the idea is that while you're running around normally, you're not having to worry about gyro at all. So where's my ship? It's over there. So I've set up some stairs here and I'm navigating the stairs normally the way I always would in the game. Now, of course, here is one thing that you might have adjusted. You might have adjusted the look sensitivity for your stick movement. And so that's also going to be something potentially that you adjust. Now, I'm probably not going to adjust that. That's fine. This seems okay to me. But if you've ratcheted that up or toned it down a bit, then you're going to need to get a balance between the stick movement and the sensitivity for the gyro. Now if I take my finger off of the stick and just use my movement, I'm running forward as normal. In fact, I just jumped. But it's going to be a little bit trickier to turn around because it's not turning a full 90 degrees. And so I can grab my stick at any time and position the direction I want to go. And then for general movement, I can use gyro by taking my finger off of the stick. And I've got it set, I think, relatively smooth. It's not really jogging around too much. I'm not getting micro movements. It feels quite smooth. And the transition between the two seems relatively stable for me. Some people are going to like a highly sensitive movement. They're going to want to be able to go up and down further than I want to go up and down. They're going to want to go left and right further than I do. They might even want the going from one edge of their screen to another, which is what I'm doing here. They might want that to be a full 360 degree turn. I really don't want to do that. That would just give me motion sickness. I'm quite susceptible to motion sickness anyway. And trying to set this up in different ways has been a real challenge. But this feels quite normal to me. And especially as I can turn it off. And also I can do what's called ratcheting. So that's where, for instance, I was doing that earlier a little bit. If I'm running around here and I want to turn to my right, I can put my finger on the controller and I can either turn with the controller or I can put my finger on the controller, turn and reset so that my controller is straight forward again. Finger on the controller, take it off to move, reset, take it off to move, reset, take it off to move. And that, to some people, is very natural. I find it easier to just move my stick around, personally. But it probably would depend. In a ship, for instance, it might be different. Now, I haven't calibrated to the ship yet. And I also haven't calibrated to third person. Because I figure that the most likely I'm going to be using first person. So if I'm on third person now, I just double check to see if it feels... No, it feels relatively reasonable. They are slightly different calibrations, but it's mainly a matter of can I navigate around without really thinking about it. And I think the answer here is yes. Using the stick hold, I'm finding it relatively easy to navigate. I can put my finger on the stick to give little corrections, and then I can move around quite freely. I mean, with a controller, you're used to kind of making corrections on your adjustment anyway. You're not, with a mouse, you're kind of, you can go all over the place and you don't really think too much about centering your mouse very often. But even then, you do tend to pick your mouse up, which is similar to a ratchet. So a good place to test this out is at a derelict freighter. Let's go into first person view. So here we can decide if these settings are good for us or not. Use a bolt caster. Now if I'm moving my mouse or moving left to right, that's normal, and that's with the trigger. It slows right down. So while I'm shooting, it will aim more specifically. So look, we've got some critters here because we were shooting indiscriminately with rebound on. Yeah, I would maybe want to, maybe got the up and down just a little bit tight. I might adjust that at some point. I'll let them scatter and then we'll use them as experiments. So you can see as soon as I zero in, I can be a little bit more accurate to catch them. Then I can go back to my stick to reposition, and then there's the last one. So you got behind me? No. Haven't got sound, so I've got nothing to let me know which direction he is. Oh, he's gone now. Oh, there he is. So let's get a bit of ammo, shoot that and let them scatter a bit. Which is a crazy thing to do, but it really does feel like I'm just picking them off. So it does feel like everything's calibrated quite nicely. It's just maybe the up and down I might adjust very slightly. One more. Where do I keep? Ah, there he is somewhere. It's a lot easier than using the controller. If I was trying to pick him off this way, I'd have to be micro adjusting all the time, whereas I can just do that. There's the bullets flying past my shoulder. That's all of them. If I was using a better gun, I could just kill them as soon as I popped them, but that would be defeating the exercise of testing this weapon. Yep, that made short work of that. Actually, it might be worth looking at the neutron cannon because that's also a hold to aim weapon. So let's have a look at that. So if I hold to aim, it'll be charging up while I'm going in slow motion. So then I can release it, and then I can charge it up and release it. Quite a wide burst because I've maxed it. Makes it a little bit too easy. Don't even have to aim at them. Let's go back to the pulse splitter and see how we get on with it now. not as accurate because of the recoil. Now, one of the things I will be doing at some point is setting up the combat scope. And combine that with aim. But that's another video, I think. As I say, I think I might adjust the up and down a little bit, but apart from that, it's going quite smoothly, and I don't really feel like I'm getting any motion sickness. So that to me is a good win. So I wouldn't want to adjust the up and down. I find up and down is the real motion sickness trigger. So I wanted to go slightly more than it is. It's on -75 at the moment. Feels a little bit more smooth. It might be even too much, but what I was finding is that I was drifting and going down and down and down. I had to reset to go back up. So I'd prefer it to be just a little bit more responsive up and down. So I'll give that a try. See how that goes. So as before, I'm going to share this with the community. So share layout with community. Pharaoh gyro to mouse on foot. Calibrated to default look. 360 degree at 1440p. Whether that works on all 1440p and you won't have to calibrate it at all, I have no idea. Obviously, I have adjusted it to my own preferences. You might want to adjust some sensitivities. So there you go. There's Gyro for Steam controller. As I mentioned during the video, I might also be looking at the more precise aim using the combat scope, because theoretically the combat scope stops some of the recoil, so I might be having a look at that. So that would be a separate video. I'll also be looking at a gyro setup for ships, and then after all of that I'll be looking at things like how to set up the virtual menus on the touchpads, because that's something that I have definitely been using ever since I had a Steam Deck, and I find that really useful for things like target acquisition in ships, and also for things like switching weapons on foot. Until then, I've been Pharaoh, travel well, and goodbye for now.